Hey guys, in today's video, I'm going to walk you through 5 of my favorite tips for using your mouse less and your keyboard more. If you're new to the channel, my name's Brandon and I'm a product designer working in healthcare. Let's jump into it. First tip, use a window manager of some kind. The goal here is you want to be able to manage your windows, move them around without having to take your hands off of your keyboard. So if you want to have 2 windows side by side, or jump focus from one window to another, you want to find some way to be able to do that without having to move to your mouse. So there are a number of really good ones. It doesn't really matter which one you use as long as you can do what I just said, which is put 2 tabs side by side, switch focus to a different tab without having to relinquish control of your keyboard. So I use Amethyst. I use Shift It for a bit. The issue with Shift It for me was that I couldn't move focus from one window to another without having to pick up the mouse. So ended up dropping that. Let me show you how I use that inside of Amethyst. So I have set up a hyperkey within my Mac that allows me to add additional keyboard shortcuts without having to conflict with other apps. So I've got Obsidian here on the left, and then I have Sublime here on the right. And just to demonstrate this, I can hold Hyper and then tap D to move focus to the window on the right. I can tap S to move it to the window on the left. And I can also move focus from different monitors with A and F. A will take me a monitor to the left. F will take me a monitor to the right. And that allows me to control where my focus is within the OS as an extension kind of my brain. So instead of having to like move a cursor, find it, focus it, I can just leave both hands on the keyboard and I have tons of commands at my disposal. Similarly, I can move windows around, again with a hyper combination. So again, this works very similarly to using your H, J, K, and L keys as arrow keys. I'm doing that, but basically just in a different place on the keyboard. So hyper plus A, S, D, F will change which window is focused, and hyper Z, X, C, and V will move windows around. So hyper X will swap 2 windows. If I have more than one, it'll basically be clockwise. If I do C, it'll be counterclockwise, and I can move windows to different monitors with Z and V respectively. Again, Z will move the focused window to the monitor to the left, and V will move it to the monitor on the right. If you're curious how to set that up, I've got a whole video on that in Amethyst that I will link above. All right, tip number 2 is learning how to maneuver your text cursor with just your arrow keys. All right, so there are a couple key commands here. But basically you can use your left, right, up and down arrows in a combination with Alt, Command, and Shift to be able to move your cursor effectively. So let me walk you through those. So if I hold Alt while using my right arrow, I can move one word at a time. If I go left, it'll go back one word at a time. And then I can move down a paragraph with down and up a paragraph with up. And then I can use Command to do the same thing, but moving one line at a time. So I can go right to go to the end of the line, left to go to the beginning of the line, down to go to the end of the page, and up to go to the top of the page. And then combine all this together with Shift, and you can do selection at the same time. So if I want to select bacon, I can hold Alt and Shift, and then use my right arrow. If I want another word, I just continue holding those and go a word at a time. If I want to get the whole line, swap Alt for Command. And you can do that same thing. So get used to that, and then the number of times when you'll have to switch over to your mouse will drop significantly. All right, tip number 3 is scroll your web pages with your arrow keys. So another common scenario where people have to pick up their mice is to scroll their web pages because they use their scroll wheel. But on most websites, you can actually use your up and down arrow keys to move one line at a time. And for me, I use Hyper plus HJKL. And so I can basically keep my hands on the home row while doing this and don't have to move at all. That's completely optional, and using your regular arrow keys is just fine. One other recommendation is to check out the Vimium Chrome extension, which will let you just use the J and the K keys without having to go through Carabiner and set up HJKL arrow keys. And Vimium also does a bunch of other cool things. So if you're curious about that, let me know. I can put a video together there. All right, so tip number 4 is to learn your keyboard shortcuts. So I'm going to break this down into 2 types. So one are your macOS navigational shortcuts, and then 2 are just app-specific keyboard shortcuts that you use in your given apps. So let's first do the macOS ones. So a lot of these are going to be really basic, but I want to make sure you've got these in your arsenal. All right, so the first of which is going to be Command Tab. I find myself commonly calling this Alt Tab because I was on Windows for so long, but on the Mac it's actually Command Tab. So I hold Command and tap Tab. It'll bring up this navigational window where I can switch between different applications. So I've got Chrome open currently, and if I tap Tab again, now Spotify will be focused. And then if I go in and do the same thing, now Chrome will be focused. This is really handy, but where it falls down is you're switching applications. And if an application ever has more than one window, you're gonna kind of struggle to get the active window you want. So more on how to fix that here in a little bit. All right, so the next tip is how to take an application and make it full screen on your Mac. One caveat here is I don't really recommend using this for most things, but there are scenarios where you need to take an app full screen. And so you can do that with Control Command F, and that will take the focused window and make it full screen. A follow-on shortcut to this is you can then use Control and your left and right arrows to change which space is focused. So you can also use Expose to have multiple spaces. I don't take a ton of advantage of this, but I know plenty of people who do. Another common reason to have to use your mouse is to play, pause, or change volume on whatever you're listening to. Just make sure you know what the play, pause buttons are so that you can do those from your keyboard. I'm not using my laptop. It's currently in clamshell mode, so on my keyboard it's Function plus F4, but that's an odd shortcut just on my keyboard. Figure out what it is for yours. All right, one more tip is to take advantage of the fact that Function plus backspace on the Mac will actually do a forward delete. I don't have a dedicated forward delete on my keyboard, and even if I did, I don't know if I know where to place my fingers for it. But just know that if you hold Function and then tap your backspace, it'll do a forward delete. And that saves me a ton of time trying to move my cursor up when really I just want to delete from where I'm at. So see if you can mix that in. So another function that I use a ton is taking screenshots with my keyboard. So for me, I hit Control Command Shift 3, and that'll take a screenshot of all of my windows and put that onto my clipboard so that I can paste that into any application. The other one that I use is the same thing, but instead of 3 using 4, and that'll let me either drag out a selection or I can press the space bar and pick a specific window. And again, that's gonna go to my clipboard again. This saves me so much time and I use it literally 10, 15 times a day. All right, other really basic things are closing windows. So if you hit Command W, it'll close the active window. If you need to quit an application, you can also hit Command Q to close that application. Just get comfortable with this so that you can move around easily. All right, moving on to application-specific shortcuts. These are going to vary from user to user and what applications you use. Find shortcuts for the things that you find yourself commonly doing. For me, I found myself hunting and pecking within Slack to find specific conversations, and instead I learned that I can use Command and K to basically do a search for anyone within Slack. So as long as I know the name of the channel that I'm trying to jump to, all I have to hit is Command K, type in the name of the channel or the person and press enter, and it'll take me straight through there and put my cursor into the text box so I can type out whatever my message is. Huge time saver if you use Slack a lot. So another application that I use a ton is Chrome, and so I found a handful of keyboard shortcuts to make that a little bit easier to navigate around. So I can hit Command plus L to focus the status bar to type in wherever I want to go. Obviously I can hit Control plus Tab to switch between the different tabs. And then lastly, you can use Command and the square brackets to go back pages and forward pages. So left square bracket will take me back a page, Command plus right square bracket will take me forward a page. And obviously you can refresh the page by hitting Command R. All right, and my fifth and final tip is figure out how you're going to launch and jump to applications that you use all the time. For me, I use Carabiner Elements, and I found a video online that showed how to do O-launching, which is simultaneously holding one key and then tapping another to fire some function. So for me, I started on O, and then I ended up migrating to open bracket as it's a key I don't use quite as often. I found myself that I was typing really quickly, I would trigger it on accident while typing words, and it got really frustrating. So just to walk you through this, for me, if I tap open bracket and M at the same time, it's going to launch Spotify. So I'll just hold bracket, tap M, and Spotify will launch if it's not already launched, or it will focus it if it is. And so if I want to go back to Sublime now, I have another keyboard shortcut set up for Sublime, which is bracket plus E to open my editor, and now I'm back in Sublime. So regardless of whether it was open or not, it'll take me to that application, which is really handy. And if you have an application full screened on a different monitor, that can be handy too. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll have Slack or TickTick or applications that just need to be open all day, full screen on one monitor, and it'll swap between those spaces as I need them. So another thing to consider here is using something like Alfred or Spotlight to be able to open applications that you don't use all the time. So I set up O-launching keyboard shortcuts for the apps that I use all day, every day, but you never know when there's something that you're gonna need just right now. So for instance, if I needed to go to Post-to-Co, I can just hold Alt, tap space, and then I can type in Post-to-Co, or at least a few letters, and I can open that application without having to move my hands off my keyboard. The last thing I'll leave you with is just one little exercise, which is if you wanna get serious about this, just keep a piece of paper or a mental note handy of all the times that you stop and pick up your mouse and think about what you were doing in that moment and whether there could have been some way to use your keyboard to do that. So those are my 5 tips for how to use your mouse less and your keyboard more. What are you using your mouse for that you could be using your keyboard? For me, it was totally Slack and trying to find those conversations. I wasted so much time before I learned that. Anyway, let me know down in the comments. Hey guys, before you go, if you enjoyed the video, please tap the like button. If you didn't, then that other button works too, and you can help me out a ton by subscribing to the channel. Thanks. Have a great day. Peace.